Red warning
Reroute
glyphs
auxiliary
painted
power
his
the
vision through the
stabilizers.
neural
Compensate
interface,
for the
each
energy
one a
flux.
scream of
I
dying
found a
systems.
intercepts now.
The Craven had come with murder
The enemy
in their
advances.
weapons arrays,
We must
and
strike
they were
now.
making good on
Mobilize
their
all
promise.
forces. We fight for our
Forward
survival.
shields at 18%. His tactical officer called out, her forearms dancing across holographic controls. Quantum core temperature critical. Sir, we cannot sustain this. Through the observation dome, space twisted with violence. 3 Craven warships circled like predators, their hulls black as judgment, bristling with weapons that had ended civilizations. They fired again. Lances of corrupted energy tore through the darkness, and the celestial whisper howled in answer. Vorax had commanded starships for 130 years. He had witnessed the birth of nebulae and the death of stars. He had navigated the political labyrinth of the Zephyrian Council and emerged with his honor intact. But this battle fought in the empty spaces between named systems would be his first defeat. The thought tasted like ash. Evasive pattern Kiva 7. He ordered, his voice steady despite the chaos. His crew needed to hear confidence, even if it was a performance. Especially if it was a performance. Redirect all available power to aft shields. Prepare the quantum jump drive for emergency transition. Sir, the jump drive is compromised. We'll be lucky if we can manage a single system leap. Then we'll make it count. Vork's eyes, all 4 of them, swept the tactical display. The nearest inhabited system was 12 light-years distant, but directly ahead, a mere 0.2 light-years away, hung an unremarkable yellow star. According to the database, it hosted a single world with primitive life. Pre-warp, pre-fusion. They still burned hydrocarbons for energy and fought wars over resources that any civilized species could synthesize. Perfect, another impact. The ship screamed. Vorax felt it through the neural link, felt the celestial whisper dying around him like a living thing in its final moments. He had served on this vessel for 15 years. She had carried him across the galaxy with grace and power. Now she would carry him one last time. Helm set course for the 3rd planet of that yellow star. All hands brace for emergency jump. Sir, that's a restricted world. The inhabitants are classified as emerging primitives. Council law forbids. Council law assumes we'll survive long enough to care about it. Vorax allowed himself a grim smile. The Craven are offering us death now, or death in 3 minutes. I choose a 3rd option. Execute the jump. The universe bent. Reality folded inward, compressing 14 trillion kilometers into a single screaming moment. The quantum core, already damaged, howled with the strain. Vorax felt his consciousness stretch across impossible distances, felt the ship trying to tear itself apart at the molecular level. Then, with a violence that defied description, they slammed back into normal space. Alarms shrieked. Fire blossomed in the engineering section. The celestial whisper tumbled into the gravity well of the 3rd planet, trailing debris and venting atmosphere. Through the chaos of failing systems, Vorax saw the world rushing up to meet them. Blue and green, water and life, primitive and pure. All crew to escape pods, he ordered. Abandon ship. This is not a drill. His engineering chief, Korvac, looked up from his station, face pale with shock. Sir, the quantum core. If we abandon it here, activate the self-destruct sequence. We will not leave Zephyrian technology for primitives to stumble upon. The self-destruct is damaged, sir. I can only guarantee 30% effectiveness. Vorax nodded. Even 30% would reduce the ship to molten slag. The primitives below would find wreckage, but nothing they could possibly understand. They would stare at it the way their ancestors might have stared at a lightning bolt, awed and confused. The thought brought him no comfort. The celestial whisper had been his home. Now she would be his grave marker, left behind on a world that didn't even know his species existed. Do it, he said quietly. Then get to the escape pods. That's an order. The ship struck the planet's atmosphere like a stone thrown into still water. Fire engulfed the hull as friction turned air molecules into plasma. The celestial whisper, designed to glide between stars with elegant precision, became a screaming meteor blazing across alien skies. Vorax watched through external sensors as the planet's surface rushed closer. Forests, mountains, a vast wilderness unmarked by cities or industry. Good. The primitives wouldn't be immediately endangered by the crash. Not that they could understand what was happening even if they stood directly beneath his falling ship. They would see a bright light in the sky, perhaps. They would tell stories about it around their crude fires. They would not comprehend that they were witnessing the death of a vessel that had crossed distances their minds could not even conceptualize. The celestial whisper hit the ground at 300 meters per second. The world turned white, then red, then black. When consciousness returned, Vorix found himself drifting in the void, cradled by the emergency pod's gentle gravity field. Through the transparent canopy, he could see the Celestial Whisper's final resting place, a canyon of twisted metal carved through kilometers of forest. Smoke rose in black columns, fires burned among the trees. His ship, his beautiful ship, was a corpse. The self-destruct had activated. Vorix could see the glow from the quantum core's controlled collapse, could see sections of the hull melting into slag. 30% effectiveness. Enough to destroy the critical systems, but not enough to completely erase the ship's existence. The primitives would find it. They would crawl over it like insects investigating a fallen bird. They would take pieces, perhaps souvenirs of something they couldn't possibly understand. Let them. What could they do with quantum crystalline matrices, with gravity field generators, with technology that their finest minds wouldn't grasp for another 1,000 years? All pod status report. He called over the emergency frequency. One by one, his crew responded. 17 souls accounted for. 3 had died in the crash, vaporized when the engineering section breached. Vorix added their names to the list of debts he owed the Craven. The list was growing long. Captain Vorix, came a new voice over the communications array. Rescue frequency. This is the transport vessel Stellar Merchant. We received your distress beacon. Stand by for extraction. Relief flooded through him, followed immediately by shame. He was alive. His crew was alive. But he had lost his ship, violated council restrictions, and crashed on a primitive world. The Craven had taken his vessel, but he had given them his dignity. The Stellar Merchant materialized in orbit, its bulk reassuring against the black of space. Tractor beams locked onto the escape pods one by one, drawing them up and away from the primitive world below. As Vorix's pod rose through the atmosphere, he took one final look at the crash site. The primitives would come. Of course they would. They would find the Celestial Whisper and wonder. They would touch things they didn't understand and tell themselves stories to explain the inexplicable. Let them wonder. Let them touch. Let them tell their stories. In 1,000 years, perhaps they would understand what had fallen from their sky. By then, Vorix would be dust, the Craven would be contained, and this entire incident would be a footnote in some dusty archive. The pod docked with the Stellar Merchant. Vorix unsealed the hatch and stepped into the clean-ordered corridors of a functioning ship. Medical personnel waited to scan him for injuries. His crew gathered bruised and shaken but alive. Sir Korvac approached, his face grave. About the quantum core, I couldn't completely neutralize it. Some systems might remain partially functional for years. It doesn't matter, Vorix said. The planet below is home to primitives barely beyond their industrial revolution. They still use projectile weapons and chemical propulsion. Even if they find intact technology, they won't understand what they're looking at. We could leave them an entire fleet, and they wouldn't be able to make sense of it. But even as he said the words, a small doubt whispered in the back of his mind. He pushed it away. The primitives were primitives. That was simply fact. The Zephyrian Council had classified thousands of species, and the progression was always the same. Primitives evolved slowly, predictably. They took millennia to advance from one technological tier to the next. The species below called themselves humans. The database listed them as unremarkable, carbon-based, short-lived, fractious and violent, prone to fighting among themselves over trivial differences. They had achieved atomic fission but not fusion. They had touched their own moon but had not yet established permanent settlements there. They were in every measurable way insignificant. Set course for the nearest Zephyrian outpost, Vorix ordered the Stellar Merchant's captain, and transmit my official report to the Council. They'll want to know about this. As the ship accelerated away from the primitive world, Vorix allowed himself one more glance at the planet shrinking in the view screen. Blue and green and primitive. A world that would never matter in the grand scheme of galactic politics. He turned away and walked toward his temporary quarters. He had reports to write, explanations to prepare, a career to salvage. He did not look back. The Zephyrian High Council convened in a chamber that floated in the void between 12 star systems, a monument to engineering and political necessity. Delegates from hundreds of worlds gathered here to debate matters of galactic importance. Today they would debate the loss of one ship and the violation of one restricted world. Vorix stood in the center of the circular chamber, his forearms held in the traditional pose of respectful attention. Around him, arranged in ascending tiers, sat the council members. Some were Zephyrian like himself. Others represented the dozens of species that comprised the greater galactic community. All of them watched him with varying degrees of judgment. High Arbiter Solon spoke first, his voice carrying the weight of 600 years of service. Captain Vorix Talvarin. You stand before this council to explain why you violated quarantine protocols and crashed a military vessel on a restricted, primitive world. What defense do you offer? Vorex kept his voice steady, professional. High Arbiter members of the council, I offer no defense. I offer only context. The Craven attacked my vessel without provocation. My ship was crippled. I faced a choice between certain death and a remote chance of survival. I chose survival. I chose to protect my crew. By contaminating a primitive culture with advanced technology, Solon countered. His eyes old and cold bored into Vorex. By leaving behind a treasure trove of quantum systems and gravitational field generators. By potentially accelerating a primitive species development by centuries. Do you comprehend the magnitude of your error? With respect, High Arbiter, I do not believe the error is as severe as you suggest. A murmur rippled through the chamber. Several council members leaned forward with interest. Solon's face remained impassive, but Vorex caught the flash of anger in his eyes. Explain. Vorex had prepared for this, had rehearsed it during the 3-week journey back to civilized space. The species on the planet the humans are fundamentally primitive. My database analysis shows they are still fighting wars with chemical explosives. They have not achieved sustained fusion reactions. Their space exploration consists of brief visits to their own moon accomplished through brute force chemical propulsion. He activated a holographic display showing images captured by the Celestial Whisper's sensors before the crash. Cities lit by electrical grids. Aircraft propelled by combustion engines. Nuclear weapons, yes, but fission-based, crude and wasteful. These beings are centuries away from understanding quantum mechanics at the level necessary to comprehend our technology. I activated the self-destruct sequence which destroyed 30% of critical systems. What remains is damaged, inert, and effectively useless to them. They will find wreckage. They will catalog it. They will study it with their primitive instruments and understand nothing. You seem very certain, Solon said softly. I am certain because history supports my assessment. This council has observed thousands of emerging species. The progression is always the same, always slow, always predictable. These humans will stare at Zephyrian technology the way their cave-dwelling ancestors stared at lightning. With awe, perhaps. With fear, certainly. But never with understanding. Another council member spoke, an elderly representative from the Crystalline Assembly. Captain Vorex makes a valid point. The humans are classified as a level 3 emerging civilization. They lack the theoretical framework to even begin comprehending quantum field manipulation or gravitational wave propagation. The risk of technological contamination is minimal. The risk is never minimal, Solon argued. It only takes one insight, one breakthrough, one human genius who looks at our technology and asks the right question. Vorex allowed himself a small smile. High Arbiter, with all respect to human potential, their brightest minds are currently focused on problems we solved 10,000 years ago. They debate whether their climate is changing due to carbon emissions. They struggle to cure diseases that our medical technology eliminated in the age of our ancestors' ancestors. The idea that they could reverse engineer quantum crystalline matrices from damaged wreckage is frankly absurd. Solon studied him for a long moment. The chamber fell silent, waiting for his response. You make your case well, Captain. Perhaps too well. Tell me, do you truly believe the humans pose no threat, or are you simply trying to minimize your own culpability? The question hit like a physical blow. Vorex felt the eyes of the entire council on him. His next words would determine his future. Would he remain a captain with the potential for advancement, or would he be stripped of rank, assigned to some backwater outpost, to live out his remaining decades in disgrace? He chose truth, or at least the truth as he believed it. I believe both statements are accurate. High Arbiter, I believe I made the only choice available to preserve my crew. And I believe the humans are no threat because they cannot be. They are primitives, that is simply their nature. No amount of salvage technology can change that fundamental reality. Solon leaned back in his seat. Around the chamber, council members whispered among themselves, debating in a dozen different languages. Finally, the High Arbiter raised a hand for silence. This council will vote on the matter. But before we do, I have one more question for you, Captain Vorex. If we were to send a retrieval team to recover the Celestial Whisper's remains, how would you assess the difficulty? Vorex considered. The planet is remote. The crash site is in a wilderness area far from major human population centers. A retrieval operation would require significant resources, ship's personnel time, resources that might be better spent on more pressing matters. The Craven are still active. The border disputes with the Carleth Collective remain unresolved. We face real threats, High Arbiter. The humans are not one of them. So you recommend we leave the wreckage where it lies? I recommend we classify the planet as a low-priority monitoring station. We observe. We watch for any signs of unexpected technological advancement, and we allocate our limited resources to actual threats rather than theoretical ones. Solon's expression remained unreadable. Your recommendation is noted. This council will now vote on three matters. First, whether Captain Vorix acted appropriately given the circumstances. Second, whether the wreckage should be retrieved. Third, whether the captain should face disciplinary action. The vote took an hour. Vorix stood in the center of the chamber, maintaining his posture of respectful attention, while his future was decided by voices he could barely hear. When it was done, Solon announced the results. The council finds that Captain Vorix acted within acceptable parameters given the extreme circumstances. The vote to retrieve the wreckage fails by a margin of 3 votes. Resources will not be allocated for recovery operations. However, a monitoring station will be established to observe the human homeworld for any signs of accelerated technological development. Relief washed through Vorix. He had not been found negligent. His career would survive. As for disciplinary action, Solon continued, the council has decided that Captain Vorix demonstrated sound judgment and strategic thinking in a crisis situation. Therefore, he is hereby promoted to the rank of Admiral and assigned to fleet operations in the Outer Rim sectors. Promoted, Vorix could barely process it. He had expected censure, at worst grudging acceptance at best. But promotion, thank you, High Arbiter. I am honored by the council's confidence. Solon's eyes remained cold. Do not mistake this vote for approval of your actions, Admiral Vorix. Half of this council argued for severe sanctions. You survived by the slimmest of margins. And I want you to understand something clearly. The old arbiter leaned forward. I believe you are wrong about the humans. I believe that underestimating any species is a mistake. And I want it on record that I oppose this decision. When the humans prove to be more than you expect, remember that someone warned you. The words hung in the air like a curse. Vorix met Solon's gaze and saw something there that troubled him. Not anger, not judgment. Something worse. Certainty. I will remember, High Arbiter. See that you do. This council is adjourned. 6 months passed. Admiral Vorix Talvarin settled into his new responsibilities with the efficiency that had defined his career. The Outer Rim sectors were vast, requiring constant patrols and diplomatic finesse. Pirate groups operated in the void between jurisdictions. Trade disputes flared into violence. The Craven made occasional raids testing the Zephyrian defensive perimeter. It was satisfying work, important work, work that let him forget about a primitive planet and a crashed ship, most of the time. He was reviewing patrol reports in his office aboard the fleet carrier Eternal Vigilance when the message came through. Priority alert from the monitoring station assigned to observe the human homeworld. Vorix almost dismissed it. Almost, but Solon's words echoed in his memory. When the humans prove to be more than you expect. He opened the file. The report was brief. Energy signatures detected at the Celestial Whisper crash site. Unusual fluctuations in the quantum field residue. Increased electromagnetic activity consistent with advanced scanning equipment. Vorix studied the data with growing unease. The energy signatures were weak, barely above background noise. The quantum fluctuations could be natural decay of the damaged core. The electromagnetic activity might simply be human scientists using their primitive instruments to poke at things they didn't understand. Might be. He pulled up the original crash site imagery and compared it to the new scans. The Celestial Whisper's hull had been breached in multiple places. Sections had been carefully removed, not torn away by salvage crews with cutting torches, but precisely extracted with tools that left clean edges. That was odd. The humans had plasma cutters, yes, but their technology was crude. They should have left ragged tears, melted metal signs of struggle with materials they couldn't properly process. Instead, the cuts looked almost surgical. Vorix told himself there were explanations. Perhaps they had developed better tools in the 6 months since the crash. Perhaps they were being careful treating the wreckage as an archaeological site to be preserved rather than scrap to be processed. Perhaps. He drafted a response to the monitoring station. Continue observations. Report any additional anomalies. No action required at this time. The humans were primitives. They would struggle with the wreckage for years, maybe decades, learning nothing of value. Eventually, they would give up and move the remains to some museum where future generations could stare at them and wonder. That was what primitives did. They wondered. They didn't understand. Vorix filed the report and returned to his actual work. Border patrols, pirate suppression, trade negotiations, Real threats, real problems. The humans were not his concern, but the reports kept coming. 1 month later, another energy spike, stronger this time. The monitoring station's sensors detected a brief pulse consistent with quantum field manipulation. It lasted for 3 seconds, then collapsed. The human scientists had apparently attempted to activate something and failed. Vorex noted it in his log. Attempted activation. Failed. Expected result. 2 weeks after that, electromagnetic emissions from the crash site tripled. The humans were running power through something. The monitoring station couldn't determine what exactly, but the energy consumption was significant. They were burning through gigawatts trying to make something work. Vorex smiled at that. Let them burn their resources. Let them try to power systems they didn't understand with their primitive electrical grids. The Celestial Whisper's technology required quantum coherence at temperatures near absolute zero and magnetic field strengths their equipment couldn't generate. They might as well try to run a starship on coal and steam. But the smile faded when he read the next report. The electromagnetic emissions had stabilized. Whatever the humans were doing, they had found a sustainable power configuration. That shouldn't be possible. The quantum systems required precise harmonic frequencies that their technology base couldn't achieve. Yet somehow they were maintaining power flow without cascading failures. Curious. Vorex pulled up the technical specifications for the Celestial Whisper's power distribution network. He cross-referenced it with the sensor data from the monitoring station. The numbers didn't make sense. The humans were feeding power into the system at the wrong voltage, the wrong frequency, the wrong phase alignment. It should have resulted in catastrophic failure, but it hadn't. Somehow impossibly they were making it work. He called up the monitoring station's commander. This data you're sending me, has it been verified? Yes, Admiral. Triple checked. The sensors are functioning normally. The humans are definitely running sustained power through salvaged systems. But they're doing it wrong. The power configuration is completely incompatible with Zephyrian technology. A pause. Then the commander's response came through tinged with something that might have been respect. Perhaps they're not trying to use our power configuration, Admiral. Perhaps they're adapting our systems to work with theirs. The words hit Vorex like ice water, adapting, not copying, not trying to make their primitive technology work with Zephyrian systems. Taking Zephyrian systems and forcing them to work with human technology. That required understanding. Real understanding, not the fumbling of primitives staring at incomprehensible artifacts. Continue monitoring, Vorex ordered, and increase surveillance frequency. I want real-time data on any further developments. He closed the connection and sat in silence, staring at the reports spread across his desk. 6 months. 6 months since the crash, and the humans were already doing things they shouldn't be able to do. Solon's voice echoed in his mind. When the humans prove to be more than you expect. No, Vorex pushed the thought away. This was still within the realm of primitive ingenuity. Clever, perhaps. Unexpected, certainly, but not dangerous. They were tinkering with salvage, nothing more. They might get a few systems to light up, might even manage to extract some basic functions. But building something, understanding the underlying principles, taking Zephyrian technology and improving upon it. Possible. Primitives didn't make leaps like that. They couldn't. The universe had rules. Species advanced along predictable curves. The humans were still centuries away from quantum field theory, still decades away from controlled fusion, still years away from reliable space infrastructure. 6 months of study wouldn't change that. Couldn't change that. Vorex filed the reports and forced himself to focus on his duties. The outer rim demanded his attention. Pirates had struck a trading convoy. The Craven were massing ships near the neutral zone. Real threats, actual problems. Not primitives playing with broken toys on a backwater world. But 3 weeks later, the report that shattered his certainty arrived. Vorex was in the middle of a tactical briefing when his aide interrupted. Admiral, priority message from the human monitoring station. Classified, urgent. I'm in a briefing. Sir, the classification is Omega-7. Council level, immediate response required. The room fell silent. Omega-7 classifications were reserved for existential threats. Wormhole instabilities. Rogue AI emergence. Dimensional breaches. Not primitives on a backwater world. Vorex dismissed the briefing and returned to his office. He sealed the door, activated privacy screens, and opened the message. The first line made his blood run cold. Quantum core reactivation detected. Sustained. Stable. He read it again. Then a third time. The words didn't change. The humans had reactivated the quantum core. The same core that required technology they didn't possess. Understanding they couldn't have resources they hadn't discovered. They had done the impossible. Vorix pulled up the sensor data. There it was, undeniable and terrifying. The quantum field signature was unmistakable. Weak, yes. Fluctuating, certainly. But active, sustained, stable. The celestial whisper's heart was beating again, and the humans had made it beat. For the first time since the crash, Vorix felt true fear. Not for his career, not for his reputation, for something far more fundamental. He had been wrong. The humans were not primitives. Or if they were a kind of primitive the galaxy had never encountered before. A species that could look at technology centuries beyond their understanding and not just comprehend it, but master it, adapt it, make it their own. In 6 months. 6 months. Vorix composed a message to the High Council, his hands trembling as he entered the priority codes. Then he stopped. What would he say? That he had been wrong. That the species he had dismissed as harmless was demonstrating abilities that should have been impossible. That High Arbiter Solon had been right all along. He deleted the draft and started again, and again, and again. Finally, he settled on a simple report. Factual, professional, detailed observations of quantum core reactivation, request for guidance on next steps. He did not mention his growing dread, did not acknowledge the sick certainty settling in his gut. The humans had touched lightning, and instead of being burned, they had learned to hold it. And Vorix had given them the lightning to hold. He sent the report and sat in the darkness of his office staring at the sensor data that proved everything he believed was wrong. Somewhere on that primitive world, in a wilderness far from their cities, human scientists were working with technology that should have been beyond them for centuries, working with it successfully. Solon's warning echoed in the silence. When the humans prove to be more than you expect, remember that someone warned you. Vorix remembered. He would remember for the rest of his life, but it was too late for remembering. The damage was done. The crash had happened. The technology had been left behind. And the humans, those supposedly primitive, supposedly harmless humans, had taken his gift and made it into something he didn't yet understand. But would. He feared he would understand all too well, all too soon. Outside his window, the stars turned in their ancient dance, indifferent to the terror of one Zephyrian admiral who had finally learned that the universe did not always follow the rules he thought he knew. And on a distant, blue-green world in a forest marked by fire and wreckage, the humans continued their work. Learning, adapting, growing, becoming. 12 months became 18. Admiral Vorix Talvarin had learned to dread the reports from the human monitoring station. They arrived with mechanical regularity, each one a hammer blow against the certainty he had once carried like armor. The quantum core remained active. Energy consumption increased. The humans were not just studying the celestial whisper's remains. They were consuming them piece by piece, system by system, like scavengers who had learned to digest steel. But they were not scavengers. Scavengers took what they could use and left the rest. The humans took everything. Vorix stood in the observation deck of the Eternal Vigilance, staring at the stars beyond the viewport. Somewhere in that vast darkness, 18 light-years away, a primitive species was doing the impossible. And he was the only one who seemed to understand what that meant. The doors behind him opened with a soft hiss. He didn't turn. He recognized the footsteps. "You summoned me, Admiral." His intelligence officer, Commander Thalia Kresh, moved to stand beside him. Her reflection in the viewport showed concern etched across her features. "I need you to review the latest reports from the human monitoring station. Tell me what you see." She activated her portable display, scrolling through weeks of data. Vorix watched her expression shift from mild interest to confusion to something approaching alarm. "The energy signatures are increasing exponentially," she said finally. "They're not just maintaining the quantum core. They're enhancing it. That's what the data suggests. But that's impossible. They don't have the theoretical framework. They shouldn't even understand what they're looking at, much less improve it." Vorix finally turned to face her. "And yet they are. Every report shows progression. 6 months ago, they activated the core. 9 months ago, they stabilized it. Now they're modifying it, making it more efficient than the original design." Talia's 4 eyes widened. "More efficient than Zephyrian engineering. The power consumption ratios suggest their modifications reduce waste heat by 17%. Our best engineers would need years to achieve those kinds of improvements. The humans did it in 6 months." Silence fell between them. Outside, the stars burned cold and indifferent. "What do you want me to do, Admiral?" "I want you to send a reconnaissance probe, stealth configuration. I need visual confirmation of what's happening at that crash site. Sensor data can be misinterpreted. I need to see with my own eyes what the humans are building. Sir, that's a direct violation of the Council's monitoring protocol. We're supposed to observe passively, not actively investigate. The Council's protocols assumed the humans would remain primitive. They didn't account for this. Vorix gestured at the data floating in the holographic display. We're watching a species evolve in real time, Commander. The rules have changed. We need to change with them. Talia nodded slowly. I'll prep the probe immediately. How long do you want it to remain in their system? 72 hours. Get me everything. Visual scans, energy readings, communication intercepts. I want to know what they're eating for breakfast if possible. Understood, sir. She departed, leaving Vorix alone with the stars and his growing certainty that he had set something terrible in motion, not by sending the probe, by crashing on that primitive world 18 months ago, by underestimating the humans. The probe launched 3 days later, a teardrop of shadow that slipped through the void like a whisper. Zephyrian's stealth technology was the finest in the known galaxy, perfected over millennia of espionage and war. The probe could drift within meters of a planetary sensor array and remain invisible, its hull absorbing electromagnetic radiation across every spectrum. It entered the human solar system on the dark side of their star, coasting on momentum alone, systems powered down to minimum. Nothing to detect, nothing to trace. Vorix watched its progress from his office, the live feed transmitted via quantum entanglement, impossible to intercept or jam. The probe would reach the third planet in 48 hours, orbit for 72, then return with data that would either confirm his fears or prove them unfounded. He knew which outcome he hoped for. He suspected which outcome he would get. The first 30 hours passed without incident. The probe glided through the outer system, past gas giants and frozen rocks, toward the blue-green world that haunted Vorix's dreams. Sensors picked up the usual signatures of a Level 3 civilization. Communication satellites in geosynchronous orbit, weather monitoring stations. The crude beginnings of a planetary defense network, missiles tipped with atomic warheads, primitive but deadly to anything that came close enough. The humans were afraid. Good. Fear meant respect for the dangers of the universe. Fear meant they understood their vulnerability. Or so Vorix told himself. At the 40-hour mark, the probe crossed the orbit of the planet's single moon. Vorix was reviewing supply requisitions when the alarm sounded, not the gentle chime of a routine notification, the sharp, urgent wail of a critical alert. He pulled up the probe's feed. Every sensor on the probe had lit up simultaneously. Active scanning, multiple sources, converging vectors. They had been detected. Impossible. The stealth systems were perfect, had been tested against every known detection methodology. The humans shouldn't even know the probe existed, much less be able to track it. Vorix watched in growing horror as targeting solutions appeared on his tactical display. The humans weren't just detecting the probe, they were locking weapons on it. Evasive protocols, he barked at the probe's controlling AI. Full power to stealth systems. Get out of there. But the probe's AI was already executing escape maneuvers. Thrusters fired. The probe jinked and weaved, trying to break the targeting lock. It was designed to evade, programmed with patterns that had fooled every species the Zephyrians had ever encountered. The humans weren't fooled. A beam of coherent light speared through space, invisible until it intersected the probe's hull. For a fraction of a second, the probe's cameras transmitted an image of terrible clarity. An orbital platform bristling with weapons hanging in the darkness like a predator. Then the feed went dead. Vorix sat in stunned silence. The probe was gone, destroyed, and the humans had done it so casually, so efficiently, that it looked almost routine, like they destroyed invisible stealth probes every day. His communicator chimed. Commander Thalia, her voice tight with shock. Admiral, the probe. I saw. How did they detect it? Our stealth technology is... I know what our stealth technology is supposed to be, Commander. Apparently, the humans didn't read that particular technical manual. Sir, this changes everything. If they can detect our stealth probes, that means their sensor technology is far more advanced than we thought. Far more advanced than it should be. Vorix closed his eyes. The pieces were falling into place, forming a picture he didn't want to see. They've been reverse engineering our systems for 18 months. We gave them quantum cores, gravitational field generators, sensor arrays that can detect tachyon emissions across light years. Of course they can see our probes. We taught them how. What are your orders, sir? What were his orders? Report to the Council. Admit that his assessment of the humans had been catastrophically wrong. Watch his career implode in real time. Maintain current monitoring protocols. No more active reconnaissance. We watch from long range only. Sir, with respect, long-range monitoring isn't giving us enough data. We need to know what the humans are doing. Then we'll have to learn another way. Vorix terminated the connection and pulled up the final image transmitted by the probe before its destruction. The orbital platform frozen in perfect detail. He zoomed in, enhancing the image. The platform's hull bore markings. Human script. He ran it through the translation database. Earth Defense Force. Station 7. Station 7, which implied there were at least 6 others. The humans hadn't just built one orbital weapon, they had built a network, and they had done it in 18 months. Vorix felt the walls closing in. He needed to report this, needed to warn the Council that their assumptions about the humans were fundamentally flawed. But reporting meant admitting failure, meant validating every warning High Arbiter Solon had issued, meant the end of his career. He sat in the darkness, paralyzed by indecision, while 18 light years away, the humans continued their inexorable advance. The decision was made for him 2 weeks later. Vorix was overseeing fleet exercises when the priority message arrived. Council-level encryption. Sender High Arbiter Solon. His blood turned to ice. He retreated to his private office, sealed the door, and opened the message. Solon's face filled the display, ancient and implacable. Admiral Vorix, I have reviewed the reports from the Human Monitoring Station. I have also reviewed your decision to send an unauthorized reconnaissance probe into restricted space. A probe that was, I note, destroyed by human defenses. Vorix said nothing. There was nothing to say. I warned you, Solon continued, his voice soft but cutting. I warned this entire council that underestimating the humans was a mistake. You dismissed my concerns. You assured us that primitives could not possibly comprehend our technology. You were wrong. Still, Vorix remained silent. What defense could he offer? The facts spoke for themselves. However, Solon said, and something in his tone made Vorix's attention sharpen, I am not contacting you to gloat. I am contacting you because we have received disturbing intelligence from our sources in the Craven Collective. An image appeared beside Solon's face. A Craven warship, its hull black and brutal. Then another and another, dozens of ships massing at the edge of Craven space. The Craven have been monitoring the human world as well. Their spies are not as subtle as ours, but they are persistent. They have reached the same conclusion you have. The humans are advancing at an unprecedented rate, and the Craven see an opportunity. Vorix found his voice. They're going to attack. More than that, they have proposed a joint operation. Craven's ships will provide overwhelming force. Zephyrian expertise will provide legitimacy. Together we retrieve the Celestial Whisper's remains before the humans can fully weaponize what they have learned. That's madness. The humans have orbital defenses. They destroyed our stealth probe without hesitation. A joint fleet would be seen as an invasion. Which is precisely why the Craven wants Zephyrian involvement. To make it appear as though we are simply reclaiming our stolen property. To give them political cover for what is essentially a preemptive strike against a species they view as a threat. Vorix felt the trap closing, and the Council has agreed to this. The Council is divided, but I have made a compelling argument. The humans have violated galactic protocol by weaponizing salvaged technology. They have built orbital weapons platforms. They have demonstrated hostile intent by destroying our probe. Therefore, we have the right, even the obligation, to prevent further proliferation of dangerous technology. You're manipulating the Council into a war. Solon's expression didn't change. I am protecting galactic security. Something you failed to do when you crashed on that primitive world and left our most advanced technology lying in the dirt for scavengers to claim. The words hit like a physical blow, because they were true. All of it was true. What do you want from me, High Arbiter? I want you to lead the Zephyrian contingent of the Joint Fleet. 12 ships. You will coordinate with Warlord Gaz's Corps of the Craven Collective. Together you will retrieve the Celestial Whisper's remains and neutralize any human military assets that interfere. And if I refuse, then you will be court-martialed for violating monitoring protocols, stripped of rank, and assigned to a penal research station for the remainder of your natural life. Your choice, Admiral Vorix. Ayanim. Lead the fleet and retain some measure of dignity, or refuse and lose everything. Vorix stared at the screen, seeing his future collapse into a singularity of terrible choices. Lead an invasion fleet against a species that had done nothing except defend itself against his mistakes, or destroy his career, his reputation, his very identity. How long do I have to decide? Your ships depart in 3 weeks. The Craven fleet will rendezvous with you at the designated coordinates. From there, you jump to the human system and execute the recovery operation. Efficiently, professionally, as befits a Zephyrian admiral. The transmission ended, leaving Vorax alone with his thoughts and the crushing weight of consequences he had set in motion 18 months ago. The next 2 weeks were a blur of preparation and dread. Vorax selected his fleet carefully, 12 ships, the newest, fastest, most advanced vessels under his command. Crews that had trained together, fought together, bled together. If he was going to face the humans, he would do it with warriors he trusted. But trust felt hollow when he didn't trust the mission itself. Commander Thalia found him in his office 3 days before departure. She looked as tired as he felt. The final ship assignments are complete, Admiral. All vessels are ready for jump. Thank you, Commander. She hesitated. Sir, may I speak freely? Of course. This mission feels wrong, everything about it. The humans defended themselves against our probe. That's their right. We violated their space. And now we're returning with a war fleet because they had the audacity to shoot back. Vorax met her gaze. I agree. Then why are we doing this? Because the alternative is worse. If I refuse, Solon will find another commander. One who doesn't question orders. One who won't hesitate to use overwhelming force against a species that's done nothing except learn too quickly. And you think you can prevent that? I think I can try. The Craven want blood. Gazakor is a warlord, not a diplomat. He sees the humans as a threat to be eliminated. If I'm there, if I can maintain some degree of control over the joint fleet, maybe I can prevent this from becoming a massacre. Talia's expression softened. You're trying to protect them. I'm trying to protect everyone. The humans. My crew. Whatever shred of honor I have left. He paused. You'll command the eternal vigilance in my absence. Keep the fleet together. If something happens to me, nothing will happen to you, sir. I'll make sure of it. After she left, Vorax pulled up the latest intercepted human communications. Most of it was encrypted beyond his ability to decode, but some transmissions leaked through and clear. News broadcasts, public announcements, the casual chatter of a civilization going about its daily business. And woven through it all like a thread of steel were the military transmissions. Encrypted, yes, but the pattern was clear. The humans were mobilizing. Not in panic, not in chaos. With the calm efficiency of a species that knew war was coming and had decided to meet it on their own terms. He found one transmission that made his blood run cold, a fragment of decoded text pulled from military channels. Project Retribution completion ahead of schedule. 5 units operational. Repeat, 5 units operational. Awaiting final integration and crew assignments. 5 units. 5 ships numb. That was impossible. Building one ship took years. 5 ships took decades. The humans couldn't possibly, but they had done the impossible before. Repeatedly. Why should this be any different? Vorax pulled up every scrap of intelligence on human orbital activity. He correlated energy signatures, construction patterns, material shipments. He built a model of what the humans were doing based on observation and analysis and 18 months of watching them defy every expectation. The model showed 5 distinct construction sites, 5 separate energy signatures, 5 independent gravitational field generators, 5 ships. He was going to lead 12 Zephyrian vessels and 50 Craven warships against 5 human ships and a network of orbital platforms. The odds were overwhelmingly in his favor. So why did he feel like he was leading his fleet to their deaths? But another transmission caught his attention. This one was different, not military, scientific. A fragment of conversation between what appeared to be researchers. Dr. Reeves wants final verification on the satellite intercept protocols. We've been monitoring their communications for 2 years. She wants to make sure we haven't missed anything before the fleet arrives. Vorax froze, read it again. Monitoring their communications for 2 years. 2 years meant the humans had been watching the Zephyrians since before the probe was destroyed, since shortly after the crash itself. The implications hit him like a physical blow. If the humans had access to Zephyrian communications, they would know about the joint fleet. They would know about Solon's manipulation. They would know about Vorax's reluctance. They would know everything. And they had been preparing accordingly. Vorax sat in the darkness, feeling the full weight of his mistakes settling on his shoulders. He wasn't leading a fleet into battle. He was leading them into a trap designed by a species that had been watching, learning, and preparing for this exact moment for 2 full years. The rendezvous with the Craven fleet was everything Vorax had feared. Warlord Gazakor commanded from a monstrosity called the Blood Reaper, a ship so bristling with weapons that it looked like violence given physical form. The Craven fleet surrounded it, 50 vessels of varying size and lethality, all painted in the black and red that marked their civilization's aesthetic. War and death. The Craven understood nothing else. Gazikor appeared on Vorex's display, his scaled features twisted into what might have been a smile or a snarl. With the Craven, it was hard to tell the difference. Admiral Vorex, your ships look adequate. Try not to fall behind when the real fighting starts. Vorex kept his expression neutral. Warlord Gazikor, I trust your fleet is ready for coordinated operations. My fleet is ready to crush these primitives and take what is rightfully ours. The technology on that world belongs to the strong, and we are the strong. The technology belongs to the Zephyrian High Council. We are here to retrieve it, not to wage war. Gazikor laughed, a sound like metal scraping stone. Retrieve it, wage war. What's the difference? The primitives will resist. We will crush them. Then we take what we want. Simple. The Council has authorized a recovery operation, not an invasion. Your Council authorized a joint fleet of 62 warships, Admiral. What did they think we were going to do? Asked nicely. Vorex had no answer to that, because Gazikor was right. The Council had approved this mission, knowing exactly what the Craven would do. They had simply chosen to look away, to let plausible deniability shield them from the consequences of their decisions. We jump in 6 hours, Vorex said. The humans may have improved their defensive capabilities since our last reconnaissance. We should approach cautiously. Cautiously, Gazikor made the word sound like an insult. We have 62 ships. They have a handful of orbital platforms, and maybe one salvaged wreck they've managed to get flying. We don't need caution, we need speed. We jump, we arrive, we overwhelm them before they can react. Warlord, I strongly advise. Your advice is noted and dismissed, Admiral. My ships will lead the assault. Your ships will provide support. Try to keep up. The transmission ended. Vorex sat in silence, feeling the weight of command settle on his shoulders like a physical burden. He was supposed to be leading this operation. Instead, he was being dragged along in the wake of a warmonger who saw violence as the solution to every problem. He thought about the humans, thought about what they had accomplished in 18 months, thought about the intercepted transmission. They've been monitoring us for 2 years. The humans knew they were coming, had known for months perhaps, and they had been preparing. Vorex pulled up the fleet roster, 12 Zephyrian ships, 480 crew members under his command, warriors who trusted him to lead them well, to bring them home. He was going to fail them. He knew it in his bones, but he was going to try anyway, try to minimize the bloodshed, try to negotiate instead of fight, try to make the Craven understand that the humans were not primitives to be crushed, but a species that had earned the right to defend what was theirs. He knew Gazikor wouldn't listen. The Craven never listened. But he had to try, because the alternative was to sail into battle knowing he had done nothing to prevent it, and that was a burden he couldn't carry. The fleet began final jump preparations. 62 ships aligning for the transition to faster-than-light travel. 62 ships full of warriors who thought they were about to win an easy victory against primitives who couldn't possibly stand against them. Vorex walked through his flagship looking at the faces of his crew, young and old, experienced and green, all of them trusting him to lead them through whatever came next. He stopped in the ship's chapel, a small room set aside for meditation and prayer. He wasn't a particularly religious man, but he found himself looking at the ancient symbols carved into the walls, wondering if there were gods who listened and cared about the fates of those who sailed between the stars. If there were, he had one prayer. Let me be wrong. Let the humans be what I thought they were. Primitives playing with salvage. A species that will surrender when they see our numbers. Let this be easy. But even as he spoke the words, he knew they were lies. The humans hadn't done anything the easy way. They had taken impossibility and made it routine. They had looked at technology centuries beyond their understanding and mastered it in months. And they had been watching, learning about their enemy, preparing for this exact moment. They would not surrender. They would not flee. They would fight. And Vorex would be there to witness it, to lead his fleet into the jaws of whatever the humans had prepared. The jump alarm sounded, final countdown initiating. Vorex returned to the bridge, settling into his command chair. Around him, his crew moved with practiced efficiency. They were ready as they could be for something none of them truly understood. All ships report ready for jump, Commander Thalia reported. Execute on my mark, Vorex said. He looked at the tactical display one last time. 62 ships, the combined might of 2 civilizations, against 5 human vessels and a network of platforms. The numbers said it should be easy. History said it should be impossible for the humans to resist. But Voryx had learned not to trust numbers or history when it came to the humans. He had learned to trust his instincts. And his instincts were screaming that he was about to witness something that would change everything he thought he knew about war, about technology, about the very nature of what it meant to be civilized. "Mark," he said quietly. The universe folded, reality bent, and 62 warships leaped across the light years toward a blue-green world where primitives had learned to hold lightning, where a species dismissed as harmless had been watching, learning, preparing, waiting. The jump would take 43 seconds. When it ended, Voryx would arrive in the human system and discover what 18 months of desperate innovation had created, what 2 years of patient observation had prepared. He suspected he wouldn't like the answer. He suspected it wouldn't matter. The die was cast, the fleet was committed, and whatever the humans had prepared, Voryx would face it with as much honor as he could salvage from the wreckage of his mistakes. 43 seconds. Then everything would change. Reality reassembled itself in fire and silence. The joint fleet materialized at the edge of the human solar system, 62 warships tearing through the fabric of space like predators emerging from deep water. Voryx felt the familiar disorientation of faster-than-light travel must fade as his sensors came online, painting the tactical display with hard data. The third planet hung before them, blue and green and impossibly fragile. From this distance, it looked peaceful, innocent, a world that knew nothing of the violence descending upon it. Voryx knew better. "Full sensor sweep," he ordered. "I want to know what we're facing before we advance." But Warlord Gazakor had other ideas. The Craven fleet surged forward without waiting for reconnaissance, 50 ships accelerating toward the inner system, with the kind of aggressive confidence that came from never having been truly challenged. "Gazakor, hold position," Voryx transmitted. "We need to assess their defenses before boom. Your caution bores me, Admiral. Watch and learn how real warriors fight." The Craven ships burned toward the human world, at maximum thrust weapons, charging shields raised. It was everything Voryx had feared. No subtlety, no strategy, just overwhelming force applied without thought or restraint. His tactical officer's voice cut through his frustration. "Admiral, I'm detecting unusual energy signatures in orbit around the third planet. Multiple sources. They're active. Weapons platforms charging." Voryx pulled up the sensor data. There they were, the orbital defense platforms he had seen destroy his probe. But not 7. His blood turned cold as he counted. 15, 20, 25. The humans hadn't stopped building. They had accelerated. "Gazakor, you need to see this. I see nothing but primitives hiding behind their little toys. All ships weapons free. Target those platforms. Destroy them." The Craven opened fire from extreme range energy, beams lashing across millions of kilometers. It was wasteful shooting, desperate shooting, the kind of attack that burned through power reserves without thought for what came after. The platforms absorbed the hits without flinching. Their shields, designed using principles salvaged from the Celestial Whisper, but modified in ways Voryx couldn't immediately identify, simply drank the incoming energy and held. "Gazakor, their shields are..." "I can see their shields, Admiral. All ships increase firepower. Concentrate fire on platform cluster 7. A dozen Craven warships focused their weapons on a single target, pouring enough energy into it to vaporize a small moon. The platform's shields flickered, wavered, then stabilized at what the sensors reported as 112% capacity. That was impossible. Shields didn't grow stronger under fire. They degraded. They failed. They didn't feed on incoming energy like some kind of technological predator. But these shields did. "Admiral Voryx," a new voice cut through the tactical channel. Human, female, speaking perfect Zephyrian without the slightest trace of an accent. "This is Admiral Davina Stormridge of the Earth Defense Force. You are entering protected space without authorization. State your intentions." Voryx felt every eye on his bridge turned toward him. This was it, the moment where he could still choose diplomacy, where he could still prevent what was coming. "Admiral Stormridge, this is Admiral Voryx Telvarin of the Zephyrian Star Navy. We are here to retrieve property belonging to the Zephyrian High Council, the wreckage of the Celestial Whisper and all technology contained therein. We do not wish conflict, but we will use force if necessary to reclaim what is ours." A pause, then her response cold and measured. "The wreckage you abandoned on our world 18 months ago has been claimed under salvage law as recognized by the Galactic Maritime Convention's Article 7, Section 4. We have improved upon your technology significantly. It now belongs to Earth. You have 10 minutes to leave our system or face the consequences of your trespass. Gazkor's laughter boomed across the fleet channel. Did you hear that, Admiral Vorex? The primitives are threatening us? They claim to have improved our technology. What delusion? But Vorex wasn't laughing, because he had seen what the humans could do, had watched them accomplish the impossible for 18 months, had felt the growing certainty that this confrontation would end badly. And now he remembered the intercepted transmission. They've been monitoring us for 2 years. Admiral Stormridge, please understand, I lead a joint fleet of 62 warships. We significantly outnumber your defensive capabilities. Surely we can negotiate. Wrong assumption, Admiral. The words hit like a physical blow. Vorex's tactical display exploded with new contacts. 4 ships materialized from behind the planet's moon, their stealth systems dropping away to reveal hulls that gleamed with purpose. Then a 5th appeared from the opposite direction, larger than the others, bristling with weapons, whose configuration made Vorex's tactical training scream warnings. 5 ships, just as his intelligence had suggested. But seeing them was different than knowing they existed. They were beautiful in the way that apex predators were beautiful. Sleek and deadly, combining Zephyrian design principles with something uniquely human. Aggressive angles that would never appear on a Zephyrian hull. Weapon emplacements that spoke of a species that understood violence in ways his people had forgotten. 62 ships, Admiral Stormridge said, and Vorex could hear the smile in her voice. Against 5 ships and 25 orbital platforms. Your mathematics is correct, Admiral. But your assumptions are not. A second voice joined the transmission. Also female, but older. Colder. Clinical. Admiral Vorex, I am Dr. Magistra Reeves, Chief Science Director of the Earth Defense Force. Before this engagement proceeds, there is something you should know. Vorex's sensors registered a new data transmission. The humans were sending him something. A file. Against every security protocol he opened it. The image made his blood freeze. It was footage. Security camera recordings from the Zephyrian High Council chambers. Time-stamped from 6 months ago. The meeting where Solon had proposed the joint fleet. The debate. The vote. How did you... We've been monitoring your communications for 24 months, Admiral. Dr. Reeves' voice carried the calm certainty of someone revealing a checkmate. We hacked your spy satellites shortly after your ship crashed on our world. We've watched every council session, every military briefing, every private conversation between you and High Arbiter Solon. The transmission shifted. Now it showed Vorex's own office, his meeting with Thalia, his prayer in the chapel, his moment of doubt. We know you didn't want this war, Admiral Vorex. We know Solon manipulated the council. We know the Cravens see this as a preemptive strike. We know everything. Vorex felt the universe tilting beneath him. 2 years. The humans had been inside Zephyrian communications for 2 years. Every decision he'd made, every plan he'd formed, every weakness he'd revealed, the humans had seen it all. You knew we were coming, he whispered. We knew the exact date your fleet would arrive 6 months in advance, Dr. Reeves confirmed. We knew you would bring 12 ships. We knew the Craven would bring 50. We knew Warlord Gazakor would attack first. We didn't prepare for a fight, Admiral. We prepared for your fight, specifically. That's impossible. Our encryption was designed before quantum computing became practical. Your security protocols are excellent against species at your technological level. But we're not at your level anymore, are we? We haven't been for quite some time. Admiral Stormridge's voice returned. Every failure you monitored was theater, Admiral. Every setback was staged. For 18 months, we fed you exactly what we wanted you to see. Quantum core unstable, power systems failing, technical difficulties. All lies, all designed to make you underestimate us just a little bit longer. Vorex's mind reeled. The deception campaign, the false transmissions, the carefully orchestrated appearance of struggle, all of it had been designed to lull the Zephyrians into a false sense of security while the humans built their fleet in secret. Why he managed? Why tell me this now? Professional courtesy, Dr. Reeves said. You tried to warn us. We intercepted your encrypted messages, your attempts to reach out through intermediary channels. You didn't want this war, so we're giving you one chance to withdraw with honor. The Craven won't withdraw. We know. We've read their psychological profiles. Gazakor will attack regardless of the odds. That's why we prepared specifically for him too. Gazakor snarled across the fleet channel. Enough talk, all ships attack formation Delta. We crush them with overwhelming force. Warlord, wait. But the Craven were already moving, 50 ships surging toward the human defensive line. with weapons blazing. Energy beams carved through the darkness. Missile salvos filled the void with fire. It was the kind of assault that had shattered planetary defenses across 100 worlds. The humans didn't even flinch. Their 5 ships moved with a precision that defied belief, sliding into formation like dancers who had practiced this choreography for years instead of months. The orbital platforms repositioned, creating overlapping fields of fire that turned the space around Earth into a killing zone. And then the humans fired back. Voryx had fought in 17 major engagements during his career. He had seen energy weapons, plasma cannons, graviton beams, antimatter warheads. He thought he understood the full spectrum of orbital combat. He understood nothing. The human weapons didn't fire energy. They fired matter, tungsten carbide projectiles, each one massing 2 metric tons, accelerated to velocities that made physics weep. Railguns, simple, primitive, devastating. The first salvo caught a Craven destroyer broadside. The projectile punched through the shields as if they didn't exist through the armor, as if it were paper through the entire ship from port to starboard, and kept going. The destroyer's fusion reactor breached. The ship died in a flash of light that briefly rivaled the system's star. Then a second ship died, and a third, and a fourth. The humans weren't aiming for individual targets. Their projectiles were moving so fast, carrying so much kinetic energy, that they passed through multiple ships before their momentum was finally exhausted. Each shot was a line of death drawn through the Craven formation, and the Craven were packed tight for maximum firepower concentration. It was a slaughter. "Evasive maneuvers!" Gazakor screamed. "Shatter formation, don't cluster." But it was too late. The Craven had charged into a trap designed by a species that understood kinetic warfare in ways the galaxy had forgotten. Humans had fought their wars with bullets and bombs for millennia before touching the stars. They knew velocity. They knew mass. They knew that energy weapons could be shielded against, but momentum was absolute. Voryx watched his tactical display fill with expanding debris clouds. 6 Craven ships, 8, 10. The humans were reloading and firing with mechanical precision, their railguns hammering out a rhythm of destruction. Commander Thalia's voice came through his personal channel, tight with controlled panic. "Admiral, we need to withdraw. This is a massacre." "All Zephyrian ships hold position," Voryx ordered. "Do not engage. Repeat, do not engage." "Admiral, we can't just watch." "That is exactly what we're going to do, Commander. The Cravens started this fight. Let them finish it." But even as he gave the order, Voryx felt the weight of command crushing down on him. He was supposed to be leading this fleet. Instead, he was paralyzed, watching the Craven die while his own ship sat idle, watching the humans prove everything he had feared. They weren't primitives. They had never been primitives. They were a species that had looked at the tools of war and perfected them across thousands of years of practice. They had studied their enemy for 2 years, learning tactics and strategies and weaknesses. And now they had added Zephyrian technology to their arsenal. The result was terrifying. 15 Craven ships were gone now. The survivors were breaking formation, trying to escape the kill zone, but the human ships pursued with single-minded efficiency. They didn't waste shots, didn't fire wildly. Every trigger pull was calculated. Every projectile found its mark. And their shields continued to absorb the Craven's energy, weapons growing stronger with each hit. "Admiral Stormridge," Voryx transmitted, "I am ordering my ships to stand down. We will not participate in this engagement." Her response came after a moment. "Your restraint is noted, Admiral Voryx, but it changes nothing. You brought these warmongers to our system. You share responsibility for their actions." "I understand, but I will not order my crews to die for a mistake that was mine alone." Gazakor's voice cut through the channel, distorted by rage. "Coward traitor, you abandoned the attack." "I abandoned madness, Warlord. You're fighting a battle you cannot win." "Cannot win? I have 40 ships remaining, 40 ships against their FIBA. And 10 minutes ago you had 50. How many more ships will you sacrifice before you admit the truth? The truth, the terrible, undeniable truth." The humans had spent 18 months preparing for this moment. They had studied Zephyrian tactics from salvaged databases. They had monitored fleet communications for 2 years. They had wargamed every possible scenario. They had built weapons specifically designed to counter the kind of assault the Craven were launching. They had been ready. More than ready, they had been eager. Voryx saw it now in the way their ships moved. The confidence, the precision. This wasn't desperate defense. This was a demonstration. The humans were making a statement, and they were writing it in the wreckage of Craven warships. "We are not prey. We are predators. and you made a fatal mistake by hunting us. 20 Craven ships now. The casualties were mounting faster than Gazakor could process. His remaining ships were breaking formation, fleeing in all directions, abandoning any pretense of coordinated assault. The humans let them run. They didn't pursue, didn't need to. They had made their point. But Gazakor, consumed by rage and humiliation, made a choice that would haunt Voryx for the rest of his life. If we cannot take their fleet, the warlord snarled, we will take their world. All ships target the planetary surface. Focus on population centers, civilian infrastructure. We will make them... No. Voryx's voice cut through the channel like a blade. Warlord Gazakor, I am invoking Article 12 of the Joint Fleet Command Protocol. I am assuming operational command of this engagement and ordering an immediate ceasefire. You have no authority. I have the authority granted by the Zephyrian High Council and recognized by every signatory to the Galactic Conventions. Targeting civilians is a war crime. I will not allow it. I will not be party to it. And any ship that fires on non-combatants will answer to my fleet. Silence fell across the command channels. Every commander in the Joint Fleet was processing what had just happened. A Zephyrian admiral had just threatened to fire on Allied ships to protect humans. Voryx felt the weight of that decision settle on his shoulders. His career was over. His reputation was destroyed, but some things mattered more than career, more than reputation, honor, justice. The knowledge that he could look at himself in the mirror and recognize the being staring back. Admiral Voryx Stormridge's voice was different now. Still hard, still wary, but carrying a note of something that might have been respect. Your intervention is acknowledged. I apologize for bringing this war to your doorstep, Admiral. It was never my intention. Intentions matter less than actions, Admiral, but actions can speak to character. You chose honor over alliance. That will be remembered. Dr. Reeves' voice joined the channel. We've been monitoring your communications for 2 years, Admiral. We know the political pressure Solon placed on you. We know you tried to prevent this. Your choice just now confirms our assessment of your character. Gazakor predictably chose differently. Traitor, the warlord spat. You side with primitives against your own kind. The Council will hear of this. You will be... The transmission cut off as something massive materialized in the space between the human fleet and the fleeing Craven ships. It wasn't a ship. It was a weapon, a platform so large it registered as a minor moon on Voryx's sensors, and it was pointed directly at the Blood Reaper Gazakor's flagship. Warning to all vessels, Stormridge announced, her voice carrying across every channel. You are witnessing a demonstration of Earth's final defense system. Mass Driver Platform Omega. Effective range unlimited. Payload capacity variable. Current configuration 100 metric tons of solid tungsten carbide accelerated to 0.25 light speed. Voryx did the mathematics in his head. 100 tons at a quarter of light speed. The kinetic energy would be measured in petatons. Nothing could withstand that kind of impact. Nothing in the known galaxy had armor that could stop relativistic projectiles. You're bluffing, Gazakor transmitted, but his voice carried uncertainty now. No species would build a weapon that powerful. The energy requirements alone are well within our capabilities, Dr. Reeves said calmly. We've had 2 years to prepare, Warlord. 2 years of knowing you are coming. 2 years of analyzing your tactics. 2 years of designing weapons specifically to counter your kind of warfare. She paused, and when she spoke again, her voice carried the cold certainty of someone delivering a verdict. You thought you were hunting primitives. You were wrong. We are not primitives. We are a species that has fought wars for 10,000 years. We understand violence in ways you cannot comprehend, and we have taken your technology and made it into something you never imagined. Admiral Voryx, Stormridge said, this weapon will fire in 30 seconds. I suggest you use that time to clear your ships from the firing solution. Voryx made his choice. All Zephyrian ships, emergency jump. Coordinates transmitted. Execute immediately. Admiral, we can't just leave. Execute now. That's a direct order. His 12 ships jumped folding space around themselves and fleeing to the coordinates Voryx had prepared for exactly this contingency. A safe distance, far enough to avoid the blast radius of whatever the humans were about to unleash. Commander Thalia's voice came through as the jump completed. Admiral, what about the Craven? They made their choice, Commander. Now they face the consequences. The Craven weren't so lucky, or so wise. 20 ships remained clustered around the Blood Reaper, paralyzed by shock and indecision. From light minutes away, Voryx watched as the mass driver fired. There was no dramatic flash, no explosion. Just a flicker of light as the platform released its payload, accelerating 100 tons of tungsten carbide to velocities that made a mockery of conventional warfare. The projectile crossed the distance between the platform and the Blood Reaper in less than 2 seconds. Gazakor didn't even have time to scream. The impact released energy equivalent to a medium-sized stellar detonation. The Blood Reaper simply ceased to exist, vaporized so completely that not even debris remained. The shockwave caught the surrounding Kraven ships, tearing them apart like paper in a hurricane. In less than 3 seconds, the remaining Kraven fleet was destroyed. Total casualties, 50 Kraven warships, 3,000 crew members. One warlord who had chosen pride over survival. Vorex's fleet, 12 ships, 0 casualties. Watching from a safe distance as the humans demonstrated exactly how far beyond primitives they had evolved. Admiral Vorex Stormridge's voice cut through the stunned silence. Your ships are clear to approach under flag of truce. We need to talk. The negotiation took place aboard Vorex's flagship in a conference room that had hosted diplomatic discussions for 50 years. But this was different than any negotiation Vorex had conducted, because he wasn't negotiating from a position of strength. He was surrendering. Admiral Davina Stormridge materialized via holographic projection, her image sharp and clear despite the light minutes of distance. She was younger than Vorex had expected, 36 human years, which was barely mature by Zephyrian standards. But her eyes carried the weight of someone who had seen combat, had made hard choices, had earned her rank through competence rather than politics. Beside her appeared a second figure, Dr. Magistra Reeves, 45 years old according to the intelligence files Vorex had studied. Her expression was clinical, analytical, the eyes of someone who saw the universe as a series of problems to be solved through careful observation and precise action. They studied him for a long moment before Stormridge spoke. Admiral Vorex Talvarin, we meet at last. Admiral Stormridge, Dr. Reeves, I come to offer the surrender of my remaining ships and to accept full responsibility for the attack on your system. Your Kraven allies attacked us, Admiral. You withdrew your ships before firing a shot. That suggests a different story than full responsibility. Stormridge's tone was measured professional. The Kraven attacked because I brought them here, because 18 months ago I crashed on your world and left technology that should have been secured or destroyed. Everything that happened today stems from my failure. Dr. Reeves leaned forward slightly. We've been monitoring your communications with High Arbiter Salone for 6 months, Admiral. We know he manipulated you into leading this fleet. We know he threatened court-martial if you refused. We know the political trap he constructed. The words hit Vorex like a hammer. You've been listening to council-level encrypted communications. For 24 months, Reeves confirmed. We hacked your primary spy satellites 12 months after your crash. We've had access to every classified transmission since then. Every council session, every military briefing, every private conversation. She paused. We know more about Zephyrian politics than most of your council members do. Vorex felt his worldview crumbling. 2 years. You've been inside our systems for 2 years and we never detected it. Your security is designed to stop species at your technological level, Reeves said. But Admiral, we're not at your level anymore. We passed you approximately 14 months ago. We've been several generations ahead for the past 6 months. The casual confidence in her voice was more terrifying than any weapon. This wasn't boasting. This was simple statement of fact. Stormridge spoke again. You could have fought alongside the Kraven Admiral. 62 ships against 5. Even with our advantages, those would have been difficult odds. You could have tried to overwhelm us through sheer numbers. I could have, but some battles aren't worth fighting even if you think you can win. Explain. Vorex chose his words carefully. When Warlord Gazakor ordered his ships to target your civilians, I saw the future with perfect clarity. If I participated in that, then regardless of the battle's outcome, I would have lost everything that mattered. Honor, integrity, the ability to look at my reflection and recognize the being I once was. So you threatened to fire on your own allies. They stopped being allies the moment they chose to wage war on non-combatants. Stormridge studied him with those sharp, calculating eyes. You broke your alliance to protect people you'd never met, members of a species you thought were primitives just 18 months ago. I was wrong about your species, Admiral. Catastrophically wrong. You are not primitives. You are not harmless. You are perhaps the most dangerous species I have ever encountered because you combine technological brilliance with a capacity for violence that rivals the Kraven. But you also demonstrate restraint. You could have destroyed my fleet when we arrived. You have weapons that could sterilize planets. Yet you chose to only destroy those who threatened you directly. We're not monsters, Admiral. We don't kill for the sake of killing. No, you kill for purpose, for protection, for justice. That makes you something the galaxy has not seen in a very long time. A species powerful enough to dominate, but wise enough to choose when not to. Dr. Reeves spoke, her clinical tone carrying a hint of curiosity. You're remarkably calm for someone who just watched his entire mission fail, Admiral. Most commanders would be angry, defensive, trying to salvage something from the wreckage. What is there to salvage, Dr. Reeves? You've demonstrated capabilities that exceed anything I thought possible. You've been inside our most secure systems for 2 years. You've outplayed us strategically, technologically, and tactically. I'm not angry, I'm impressed and terrified. Terrified, Stormridge asked. Terrified of what you'll become, what you already are becoming. A species that can go from primitive to dominant in 18 months. That can hack quantum encryption. That can build relativistic weapons. That can predict and counter every move an opponent makes because you've been watching them for 2 years without their knowledge. Vorex met their gazes directly. You are not primitives. You are apex predators who happen to be born on a world without other apex species to challenge you. So you turned that predatory instinct inward, fought each other for millennia, and learned every possible way intelligent beings can wage war. And now you've turned that experience outward. The galaxy has no idea what's coming. Silence fell between them. In the background, Vorex could hear the soft chatter of human military operations. They were still on alert, still ready for his ships to attack. They trusted his word, but they verified it with weapons and sensors. Smart, cautious, professional. Everything a military should be. What happens now, Admiral Vorex? Stormridge asked finally. Now I return to the Zephyrian High Council and report what happened here. I will testify that humans are not primitives, that Earth deserves recognition as a sovereign power, that any attempt to reclaim the Celestial Whispers technology will result in catastrophic casualties for the attacking force. And you think your council will listen? I think they will have no choice. I am a witness to your capabilities. My testimony cannot be ignored. And if they choose to ignore it anyway, then they will learn the same lesson the Craven learned today. Some species should not be underestimated. Stormridge nodded slowly. You mentioned the Galactic Conventions earlier, Article 7, Section 4, Salvage Law. You've been studying our laws. We've been studying everything we could find in the Celestial Whispers database, Dr. Reeves said. Your laws, your politics, your history, your technology, your weaknesses. We knew you would come back eventually. We wanted to be ready. You were ready, more than ready. We had good motivation, Stormridge said. You called us primitives. You abandoned technology on our world and assumed we were too stupid to understand it. You gave us every reason to prove you wrong. Vorex allowed himself a bitter smile. And you did, thoroughly. So what now, Admiral? You go back to your council, you testify. And then what, do they send another fleet? A bigger one? Do we fight this battle again in 6 months or a year? I don't know, but I can tell you what I will recommend, which is that the Zephyrian High Council formally recognize Earth as an independent power, that we establish diplomatic relations, that we offer alliance instead of conflict, because I have seen what you can do when you feel threatened. I would very much like to see what you can do when you feel supported, Doctor. Reeves raised an eyebrow. That's quite a shift from attempted invasion, Admiral. I'm a pragmatist, Dr. Reeves. I can adapt to new realities. And the reality is that humanity has arrived on the galactic stage whether we like it or not. The question is whether we greet you as friends or enemies. And you're choosing friends. I'm choosing to not make the same mistake twice. General Thaddeus Blackwell's voice joined the transmission. The hologram expanded to show a third figure, an older human male, silver-haired, with the bearing of someone who had commanded soldiers in actual combat. 58 years old, being the strategic mind behind Earth's defense. Admiral Vorex, I've been listening to this conversation. I'm General Blackwell, Earth Defense Force Strategic Command. I have a question for you, General. You've been monitoring our world for 18 months. You sent that probe that we destroyed. You've watched us build our fleet, but you never tried to warn us that Solon was manipulating the Council into war. Why? Vorex met the General's gaze. I tried, General, multiple times. Encrypted messages, intermediary channels, every method I could think of that wouldn't immediately implicate me in treason. But I received no response. I assumed you weren't receiving the messages. A small smile touched Blackwell's weathered face. We received them, Admiral. All of them. We just chose not to respond. Why, Poyne? Because responding would have revealed that we'd hacked your communications. We needed Solon to believe his manipulation was working. We needed the Craven to commit fully to the attack. And we needed you to lead the fleet personally. You wanted me specifically? We'd been monitoring your communications with Commander Thalia, your moment in the chapel, your doubts about the mission. We knew you were a man of honor, trapped in an impossible situation. We gambled that when it mattered, you would choose honor over politics. Dr. Reeves added, we analyzed your psychological profile extensively, Admiral. Your service record, your decision-making patterns, your moral framework. We determined there was a 73% probability that you would refuse to target civilians and would break from the Craven at a critical moment. You based your entire defensive strategy on a probability. We based it on understanding human nature, Blackwell said. And we discovered Zephyrian nature is not so different. Honor matters. Justice matters. Some choices are worth making even when they cost everything. Vorex felt something tight in his chest loosen. You're saying you trusted me. We're saying we understood you, Stormridge corrected. There's a difference. Trust is earned. Understanding is achieved through observation and analysis. We observed you for 2 years. We analyzed every decision you made, and we concluded that when forced to choose between following orders and doing what was right, you would choose right. And if you had been wrong, if I had fought alongside the Craven, then we would have destroyed your fleet along with theirs, Blackwell said simply. We built enough firepower to handle 62 ships. The fact that we only needed to use it on 50 doesn't change the capability. The casual confidence was staggering, but Vorex believed them, had seen their weapons, had witnessed their perfect execution. You've thought of everything, he said quietly. Not everything, Dr. Reeves said. But we've thought of most things. That's what 2 years of preparation buys you. Time to consider contingencies. Time to build redundancies. Time to ensure that when the moment comes, you're ready for it. Stormridge leaned forward. Here's what's going to happen, Admiral Vorex. You're going to return to your council. You're going to deliver your testimony. And you're going to recommend that Earth be granted full council membership with all rights and protections that entails. And if the council refuses, then we'll handle it ourselves, Blackwell said. We don't need council protection, Admiral. We've just proven that, but we prefer cooperation to conflict. We'd prefer to build rather than destroy, and we think there are species in your council who feel the same way. We'll be watching, Dr. Reeves added. We're inside your systems. We'll know how the vote goes before most council members do. If the decision goes against us, we'll be prepared for that too. You're giving me a script to follow. We're giving you the truth to deliver, Stormridge corrected. What you choose to do with it is up to you, but Admiral, understand this clearly. Earth is not asking for permission to join galactic civilization. We're announcing our presence. The only question is whether that presence is welcomed or opposed. Vorex looked at the 3 humans on his screen, Admiral, General, Scientist, all of them younger than him by decades or centuries, all of them representing a species that had been using stone tools when his ancestors were navigating between stars, and all of them now holding the power to reshape galactic politics with a few words and a few weapons. I'll deliver your message, he said finally, and I'll recommend acceptance, not because you're threatening me, but because I believe you're right. Humanity belongs at the table. You've earned it. Thank you, Admiral, Stormridge said. Your ships are free to leave when ready. Safe passage is guaranteed. The transmission ended, leaving Vorex alone with his thoughts. Commander Thalia entered the conference room a moment later. Admiral, the crew is asking what our orders are. Set course for council space. Maximum speed. We have a report to deliver. And what will you tell them about what happened here? Vorex looked out the viewport at the distant blue-green world where everything had changed. I'll tell them the truth, Commander. That we came here expecting to face primitives and found ourselves outmatched by a species that had been watching us for 2 years. That we witnessed the birth of a new galactic power. And that the only choice now is whether we welcome them or oppose them. And you'll recommend welcome? I'll recommend survival. The humans have proven they can defend themselves. They have weapons we can't counter, technology we don't understand, intelligence operations that penetrate our most secure systems. Opposing them would be suicide. Talia nodded slowly. The crew will be glad to hear we're not fighting them again. After she left, Vorex sat alone in the conference room for a long time. He thought about the celestial whisper, about his crew who had died in the crash, about the chain of events he had set in motion 18 months ago, and he thought about the humans, about what they had accomplished, about what they would become. The galaxy was changing, had already changed, and Vorex had been there to witness it. Now he just had to convince the Council to accept the change before it was forced upon them. The journey back to the Zephyrian High Council took 3 weeks. 3 weeks for Vorex to prepare his testimony, to rehearse his arguments, to steel himself for the consequences of his choices. He had broken alliance with the Craven mid-battle, had threatened fellow officers, had surrendered to a species the Council had classified as primitives. Any one of those actions would be grounds for court-martial. Together, they could mean execution. But Vorex had made his peace with that possibility. Some truths were worth dying for. The Council convened in the same chamber where they had promoted him 18 months ago. But the mood was different now. Hostile, accusatory. High Arbiter Solon sat in his elevated seat, ancient eyes fixed on Vorex with an expression that might have been satisfaction or sorrow. Perhaps both. Admiral Vorex Talvarin, Solon began, you stand accused of dereliction of duty, betrayal of alliance, and gross incompetence in the face of the enemy. How do you respond to these charges? I acknowledge all actions described. I dispute the characterization. You dispute that threatening Allied ships is betrayal. I dispute that the Craven remained allies after ordering attacks on civilian populations. Galactic Convention prohibits targeting non-combatants. I was upholding our laws, not betraying them. Murmurs rippled through the chamber. Several council members leaned forward with interest. The Craven argue that you sided with primitives against civilized species. Solon continued, that you chose humans over your own kind. I chose honor over expedience. And the humans are not primitives. They never were. That was our fatal error. Elaborate. Vorex activated the holographic display showing footage from the battle. The Craven assault. The human defense. The railgun slaughter. The mass driver's terrible finale. The council watched in stunned silence. The humans accomplished in 18 months what most species require centuries to achieve, Vorex said. They reverse-engineered quantum technology, built a defensive fleet, created weapons that make conventional warfare obsolete, and they did all of this while monitoring our communications for 2 full years. That caused an uproar. Council members shouted over each other, impossible. Our encryption is unbreakable. What evidence do you have? Vorex played the transmission from Dr. Reeves, the footage of council sessions, the recordings of his private conversations, the proof that human intelligence had penetrated the highest levels of Zephyrian security. The chamber fell silent. Solon's face had gone pale. They've been listening to council deliberations. For 24 months, High Arbiter. They know about your manipulation. They know about the political pressure you applied to force this mission. They know everything. A council member from the Crystalline Assembly stood. If they have access to our communications, then our entire defensive strategy is compromised. Our military plans, our intelligence operations, everything. Correct, Vorex said. The humans are not primitives playing with salvaged technology. They are a mature species that has mastered information warfare to a degree we cannot match. They prepared for our attack because they knew it was coming. They prepared specifically for our tactics because they had been studying them for 2 years. Another council member spoke. You're saying they deliberately let us believe they were struggling the failed quantum core activations. The power system problems. All staged them, all theater. Designed to maintain the illusion of primitive incompetence while they built a fleet in secret. Dr. Magistra Reeves, their chief science director, personally designed the deception campaign. And it worked perfectly. Solon leaned forward. What do the humans want, Admiral? Full council membership. Recognition as a sovereign power. Diplomatic relations and mutual defense treaties. They're not asking for permission, High Arbiter. They're announcing their presence. The only question is whether we welcome them or oppose them. And if we oppose them, then we'll lose. Badly. They have weapons we can't counter. They've proven they can destroy entire fleets. And they're inside our communications networks. We cannot fight an enemy who knows our every move before we make it. Silence fell across the chamber. Vorex could see the calculations happening behind hundreds of eyes. The political implications. The military reality. The simple fact that the balance of power had shifted and there was nothing they could do about it. Finally, a voice spoke from the upper tiers. Elder Ambassador Theron, one of the oldest members of the council. I would like to hear more about Admiral Vorex's decision to break from the Craven. Specifically, what motivated this choice. Vorex turned to face the Elder. When Warlord Gazakor ordered his ships to target civilian populations, I faced a choice. I could follow my mission parameters and maintain alliance with the Craven. Or I could uphold the principles that this council claims to represent: the galactic conventions, the laws of civilized warfare, the basic recognition that some lines should not be crossed. And you chose principles over orders. I chose to be able to live with myself, Elder. Some prices are too high to pay even for victory. Theron nodded slowly. The humans were monitoring our communications. They knew you would make this choice. They calculated a 73% probability that I would refuse to target civilians. They built their defensive strategy around that assessment. General Blackwell told me directly that if I had fought alongside the Craven, they would have destroyed my fleet as well. So your choice saved your crew. My choice saved my honor. Saving my crew was a fortunate consequence. Ambassador Theron stood. The ancient being's voice carried the weight of centuries. I have lived for 800 years. I have seen species rise and fall. I have witnessed wars and peace triumph and tragedy. And I can tell you this with certainty: the greatest threat to any civilization is not external enemies. It is the internal rot of compromised principles. He turned to address the full council. Admiral Vorex stood before an impossible choice: follow orders and become complicit in war crimes, or break orders and face court-martial. He chose honor, and in doing so, he demonstrated the very principles we claim make us superior to species like the Craven. Solon's expression was unreadable. Elder Theron, are you suggesting we should not punish Admiral Vorex for his actions? I am suggesting that we should recognize those actions for what they were. Not betrayal, not incompetence, but the kind of moral courage we should celebrate in our officers. Admiral Vorex faced a test of character in the crucible of combat. He passed that test. The question now is whether this council will pass its own test, which is whether we have the wisdom to recognize that the humans have earned their place among us, whether we can admit we were wrong about them, whether we can adapt to a new reality rather than clinging to outdated assumptions. Theron's gaze swept the chamber. The humans are not primitives. They have proven that beyond any doubt. They have demonstrated technological prowess, strategic brilliance, and restraint in victory. They destroyed 50 Craven warships, but allowed Admiral Vorex's fleet to withdraw unharmed because he chose honor. That shows more civilization than many species who have sat in this chamber for centuries. Another long silence. Then Solon spoke, his voice carrying a note that Vorex couldn't quite identify. This council will vote on 3 measures. First, whether Admiral Vorex acted appropriately given the circumstances. Second, whether Earth should be granted council membership. Third, what punishment, if any, Admiral Vorex should face for his choices. The vote took 3 hours. Vorex stood in the center of the chamber, maintaining his posture while his future hung in the balance. Council members debated fiercely. Some called for his execution, others demanded full exoneration. The chamber filled with argument and counter-argument, passion and reason, fear and hope. Finally, Solon raised his hand for silence. The voting was complete. The council finds that Admiral Vorex acted within the bounds of military law and galactic conventions. The vote passes by a margin of 12 votes. Relief washed through Vorex. He had not been found negligent. The vote to grant Earth Council membership passes by a margin of 7 votes. Formal diplomatic contact will be established within the month. Earth will be recognized as a sovereign power with all rights and protections afforded to Council member species. Vorex felt his knees weaken. They had done it. The humans would be protected, would have a voice in galactic politics. As for punishment, Solon paused and his expression finally revealed something. Not anger, not satisfaction, but perhaps respect. The Council acknowledges that Admiral Vorex's choices, while controversial, demonstrated exceptional moral courage and strategic wisdom. Furthermore, given his unique experience with the human species and his demonstrated commitment to honor over politics, he is hereby appointed as the Zephyrian ambassador to Earth, effective immediately. Ambassador, Vorex could barely process it. They weren't punishing him. They were sending him back to the humans, back to the species he had wronged and underestimated, back to make things right. Thank you, High Arbiter. I accept this appointment. Solon's ancient eyes met his, and for the first time since Vorex had known him, the High Arbiter smiled. It was a small smile, sad perhaps, but genuine. I warned you about underestimating the humans, Admiral. You learned that lesson the hard way. Now go teach it to them. Show them that not all Zephyrians are fools who judge species by their technology level. Show them that we can learn from our mistakes. I will, High Arbiter. And Admiral Vorix, one more thing. Yes, the human Admiral Stormridge sent a message through our secure channels. They knew about this vote before most of us did. Before you ask yes, that confirms they're still inside our systems. We're working on that. Vorix felt a chill. What did she say? She said to tell you that Earth looks forward to working with you, that they believe in second chances, and that any ambassador who chooses honor over politics will always be welcome in their system. Vorix felt something tight in his chest loosen. The humans were giving him a chance to rebuild, to prove that his species could be better than their first impression suggested. He would not waste it. After the session adjourned, Elder Theron approached Vorix in the corridor outside the chamber. Walk with me, Admiral. They walked in silence through the ancient halls until they reached an observation deck overlooking the void between star systems. Do you know why I supported you? Theron asked. Because you believed I acted correctly. Because I saw something in the humans that reminded me of our own ancestors. When the Zephyrians were young, we were not the contemplative, careful species we are now. We were bold, aggressive. We took risks. We made mistakes, and we learned from them. Theron gestured to the stars. Somewhere along the way, we became risk-averse. We built rules and protocols to prevent mistakes. We stopped growing because we stopped taking chances. The humans remind me of what we once were. What we could be again if we remembered how to take risks. They're dangerous, Vorix said quietly. All growing species are dangerous, but they're also necessary. They challenge us, force us to question our assumptions, make us better through their very existence. You think they'll make the galaxy better? I think they'll make it more interesting. And perhaps that's what we need, a species that doesn't fit our neat categories, that refuses to follow our expected patterns, that looks at our impossible and makes it routine. Theron turned to face him directly. You have been given a rare gift, Admiral, a chance to witness the birth of something new, to be part of it, to help shape how humanity integrates into galactic civilization. Do not waste this opportunity. I won't, Elder. 1 year later, Vorix stood on Earth's surface for the first time. The joint Zephyrian Human Research Facility sprawled across what had once been wilderness. Where the celestial whisper had crashed, leaving a scar across the landscape, now stood a monument to cooperation. Zephyrian scientists worked alongside human engineers, sharing knowledge-building technologies that neither species could create alone. General Thaddeus Blackwell, the strategic mind behind Earth's defense, walked beside Vorix through the facility. His silver hair had more gray than Vorix remembered. New lines marked his weathered face, but his eyes remained sharp, alert, calculating. We've made remarkable progress, Blackwell said, gesturing to a lab where joint teams worked on improved shield technology. Your people's theoretical knowledge combined with our practical engineering approach. It's a powerful combination. The Council was skeptical, Vorix admitted. Many still believe that sharing technology with humans is dangerous, that you advance too quickly, learn too well. And what do you believe? Ambassador Vorix watched a young human scientist explaining gravitational field dynamics to a Zephyrian researcher 3 times her age. The Zephyrian was listening intently, asking questions, learning from someone he would have dismissed as primitive just 2 years ago. I believe that progress is inevitable, Vorix said. The only choice is whether we guide it or flee from it. I chose to guide it, to be part of humanity's rise rather than an obstacle to it. He said, that must have been difficult, admitting you were wrong. The hardest thing I've ever done, but also the most important, because being wrong isn't failure. Refusing to admit you're wrong, refusing to learn, refusing to change. That's failure. Blackwell nodded slowly. We've fought a lot of wars on this planet, Ambassador. Thousands of years of conflict. We've learned some hard lessons about arrogance and assumption, about underestimating our enemies. It seems like useful lessons to carry into space. The galaxy is learning those lessons now, from you. They walked in comfortable silence through the facility, past laboratories and workshops, past humans and Zephyrians working side by side. Outside the windows, Vorix could see the construction frames of new ships, not weapons, exploration vessels, science ships, craft designed to push into unknown space and discover what waited there. Joint projects, built by both species, crewed by both species, symbols of what cooperation could achieve. A familiar voice called out from across the facility floor. Admiral Vorix, General Blackwell. Admiral Stormridge approached, now Fleet Admiral of all Earth Defense Forces. She had earned a new rank and new responsibilities. Behind her walked Dr. Magistra Reeves, carrying a data tablet and looking as analytically focused as ever. Fleet Admiral Vorix greeted her with the formal gesture of respect. Dr. Reeves, it's good to see you both. Likewise, Ambassador, Stormridge said. I wanted to thank you personally. The Joint Research Initiative is exceeding all expectations. We're making breakthroughs neither species could achieve alone. Dr. Reeves looked up from her tablet. The quantum entanglement communication system is ready for field testing. We'll be able to maintain real-time contact across light years. No more waiting days for messages. Impressive, Vorix said. It's what happens when your theoretical knowledge meets our engineering persistence, Reeves said with something approaching a smile. Turns out combining two different approaches to problem solving produces better results than either alone. Who knew? They walked together to a window overlooking the crash site. The Celestial Whisper's remains had been moved to a museum preserved as a reminder of where this all started. But the scar she left behind remained, a canyon carved through forest, a permanent mark on Earth's surface. I've been thinking about something General Blackwell said, Vorix began, about humanity carrying lessons from your history into space, about not underestimating enemies. And Stormridge prompted, and I realized that the greatest lesson isn't about enemies at all. It's about allies, about recognizing potential in unexpected places, about being willing to adapt your worldview when the evidence demands it. Blackwell smiled. That's a hard lesson to learn. Most species never do. Most species never crash on a world full of you, Vorix said. I had a unique educational opportunity. Painful, yes. Humiliating, certainly. But ultimately invaluable. Reeves glanced up from her tablet again. Speaking of education, we've been analyzing the data from your intelligence networks. With your permission, we'd like to help improve your encryption protocols. Consider it a friendly gesture. Vorix raised an eyebrow. You want to help us secure our systems against the very intrusion techniques you've been using. We want our allies to be secure, Reeves said simply. Yes, we can bypass your current encryption, but we'd rather you had better encryption and we maintained access through authorized diplomatic channels. It's more civilized. I'll convey the offer to the Council. I suspect they'll accept, if only because refusing would be admitting they can't secure their own systems. Stormridge laughed. Politics. Same everywhere in the galaxy, apparently. They stood together, human and Zephyrian, watching the sunset paint the sky in colors that existed on worlds throughout the galaxy. Different species, different histories, different paths to the stars. But standing together now, learning together, building something neither could have achieved alone. In orbit above them, Earth's defensive fleet maintained their watch, 25 platforms, 7 ships, ready to defend their world against any threat, but also ready to extend a hand to any species that came in peace. The galaxy had changed in 2 years. Species that had once seemed primitive now commanded respect. Alliances that had seemed eternal had shattered. And one Zephyrian admiral had learned that the greatest wisdom was knowing how little you truly understood. Vorix had come to Earth expecting to witness primitives. Instead, he had witnessed the birth of something the galaxy desperately needed. Hope, growth, the knowledge that any species, regardless of where they started, could rise to meet their potential if given the chance. The humans had proven that, and Vorix would spend the rest of his life making sure the galaxy remembered the lesson. Some mistakes were worth making, some failures were worth surviving, because the most important lessons were the ones written in humility and paid for in pride. And Vorix had learned them all. Commander Thalia's voice came through his communicator. Ambassador, the council session is about to begin. They're ready for your monthly report. I'll be there shortly, Commander. He took one more moment to stand with his human colleagues, watching the stars emerge in the darkening sky. Thank you, he said quietly. For what? Blackwell asked. For proving me wrong, for being patient with my mistakes, for giving me the chance to make things right. Stormridge placed a hand on his shoulder in the human gesture of friendship. We've all been wrong about something, Ambassador. The measure of character is what you do after you realize your mistake. And you chose to do the right thing, Reeves added. That's why you're here, that's why this works. Vorix nodded, feeling the weight of responsibility and the lightness of hope in equal measure. He was the ambassador to a species that had gone from primitives to power in 18 months. A species that had been watching and learning and preparing while the galaxy underestimated them. A species that had taken his mistakes and turned them into their greatest strength. And somehow impossibly they had forgiven him for it. The galaxy would never be the same, and Vorix would make sure it remembered why. He turned from the window and headed to his communicator, ready to deliver his report to the council. Ready to tell them about progress and cooperation and hope. ready to show them what was possible when species chose understanding over assumption, cooperation over conflict, growth over fear. The celestial whisper had fallen from the sky like a burning star, but from its wreckage, something new had risen, something the galaxy had never seen before, something worth fighting for, something worth believing in. And Voryx would spend every remaining day of his life proving that the fall had been worth it, that the mistake had been necessary, that sometimes the universe gave you exactly what you needed by taking away everything you thought you knew. The stars waited, the future beckoned, and humanity stood ready to claim its place among them, not as primitives, not as inferiors, but as equals, as partners, as the species that had looked at impossible and made it inevitable. And Voryx had been there to witness it all.